Tonight on Spotlight.
346 people died.
I just think they are evil.
I will not fly on a Boeing plane.
That's the reality of Boeing today.
A special global investigation into the world's largest plane maker.
And then 2 fatal crashes.
And you're like, oh my God.
The cover-up.
And they denied that the plane had any manufacturing issues, ever.
The lies.
They continue to lie and deceive.
Here we go again.
The families still counting the cost.
She should be here. She should be here right now. Yesterday was her birthday.
We've been broken.
Someone has to be held responsible for murder.
Liam Bartlett sits down with the Boeing insiders who have a final warning for Australia.
Virgin, they got their head in their sand if they think that these planes aren't coming with problems.
Why is a major Australian airline spending billions on 39 new Boeing planes?
Don't fly on a MAX. They are defective planes.
You all be careful out there.
When Boeing's problems keep mounting,
Door blows off in mid-flight.
day after day.
Are we all going to die?
Stay down and just do your brace position.
Good evening, I'm Liam Bartlett, and welcome to Spotlight. American aeroplane manufacturer Boeing has had a seemingly endless stream of problems. When 2 of their 737 MAX planes crashed within months of each other, killing 346 people, Boeing claims it paid the price, forking out $2.5 billion in settlement fees and pleading guilty to lying to the US safety regulator. It all sounds pretty severe, but don't be fooled. Families of the victims say Boeing is still not accountable, and insiders say these planes continue to come off the production line with defects. Tonight, in a global investigation, we question whether Boeing has really learnt its lesson and reveal new evidence that shows the company knew of a serious fault in the 737 MAX before the fatal crashes. So what does it mean for safety over Australian skies? And should Aussie Airlines be thinking twice before buying more of these planes?
My name is Aporo Kuria. I lost my dad, Joseph Kuria Waithaka, on the ET302 crash in Ethiopia, March 2019.
My name is Clarice Moore. I am the mom of Daniel Moore. Daniel was just 24 years old when she died on March 10th of 2019.
I am Catherine Berthet. I'm coming from France, and my daughter is Camille Geoffroy.
I think death is inevitable in life, but when you find out that the death of your loved one is so needless, and then even more so, you have basically lined the ground with your loved ones while people line their pockets with money.
Number one, they don't want this to ever happen to anybody else.
Would you trade your child or your father or several $1 million?
They want the truth, they want justice, and they want accountability.
346 people died. They destroyed thousands and thousands of lives.
This is the blood that is on your hands.
I will never get a chance to see, hold, hug, kiss, and hear my daughter's voice ever again.
My sister, Samia, was killed on the plane, and I'm here very simply to confront her killer.
I don't recognize any of the Boeing you described.
Really?
And I want to assure...
You don't recognize the Boeing that has airplanes falling out of the sky? That has had 2 MAXs crash, that has had pieces of doors fall out of the sky, that have had whistleblowers come before they've sat right where you have sat and told us, these are your employees who have told us that they're not listened to, that they're retaliated against, that they're threatened. That's the reality of Boeing today.
I made that personal decision. I just can't support this anymore. I have to leave.
Joe, Liam.
Liam, nice to meet you.
You too. We good to go? Nice to meet you.
Nice to meet you, sir.
Yeah, you too.
Finally, we meet.
Thank you very much for doing this.
I think this is something everyone should know.
Ed Pierson was a leading supervisor on Boeing's 737 MAX assembly line. Joe Jacobson was an aerospace engineer with the US Federal Aviation Administration, overseeing the testing and approval of MAX planes. And this is Captain Ross Amer, a Boeing 787 Dreamliner instructor. At the top of their fields, these men are making an 11th-hour appeal to Virgin Australia, which has placed an estimated $7.7 billion order for a new fleet of the defect-laden 737 MAXes. Already, Boeing has delivered 7 to Virgin, with 31 more scheduled to arrive by 2027. They say it's not a matter of if, but when another Boeing plane will go down. We've got lots of new Boeings coming to Australian airspace. Virgin have ordered new MAXes.
Right.
What would your message be to Australian pilots flying those planes?
You all be careful out there.
Would you fly voluntarily on a 737 MAX now?
No, there's no way. Now, what I know, it scares me. And that's why I'm agreeing to this interview, because I feel like the public needs to know.
You had a very rich history with Boeing before you joined the regulator. Why did you swap sides?
I was there from 1984 to 1995 and was part of the 777 program, which was very well done. And then the emphasis shifted seemingly overnight to shareholder value, stock price, which to us engineers, we were thinking, you know, what does that have to do with our job?
When was that, 1995?
That was around 1995. The merger with McDonnell Douglas happened 2 years later, but the shift was very apparent.
That merger led to new leadership at Boeing and a new culture. What followed was a directive that almost all parts would now be made by the cheapest suppliers, more than 500 globally. Our investigation into Boeing's ill-fated 737 MAX project has taken us across America to the whistleblowers who claim the Boeing company knew of and covered up a manufacturing defect that had caused a catastrophe.
That information has never come out. And you're like, oh my God.
They claim Boeing is still producing planes with potentially catastrophic defects. The evidence is in our skies every week. At airports like this around the world, there's about 1,300 737 MAXes operating, carrying about 700,000 passengers each and every day. Here in the US, the home of Boeing, they are pretty hard to avoid. And I must admit, when we started doing this, I thought it might be a bit of an overreaction. But the deeper you dive, the more whistleblowers you talk to, the less you want to set foot on one. That said, here we go again. We finished on the other side of the Atlantic, with the families still counting the cost of flying a Boeing 737 MAX.
I don't even think words can fully express how much this has impacted us. Nobody gives you a book written going, this is how to explain to your child how your dad was killed, and killed in such a way that there's not even a direct line path for justice.
Hello everyone, my name is Mick Ryan. I'm the Global Deputy Chief with WFP Engineering, and we're here
full of laughter, fun. Mick was a fun guy. He just knew how to bring joy into a situation. His dream was always he wanted to be a dad.
Let's do it again, Dad. Okay.
outside, okay? I got this side. You gotta run.
Mick was an engineer with the World Food Programme. He was travelling to Kenya to prepare a team of engineers for humanitarian emergencies when he boarded Ethiopian Airlines Flight 302. The force of impact was so great, Mick's passport is his only possession recovered from the crash site. With a 75-year history, Ethiopian Airlines was considered one of the safest airlines in Africa until it purchased the 737 MAX.
Are you crystal clear on this? Do you blame Boeing entirely?
Absolutely. But they're not alone. There is a regulator called the Federal Aviation Authority, the FAA, and they did not do their job. They were a captured agency. In many ways, you could almost describe this as a state-facilitated corporate crime.
I remember the first day I walked in the factory and they give you this tour on the top of this area called the mezzanine, and you're looking down and you're like, oh my gosh, this is amazing. You see all these planes in varying states of build, and you're so proud because you're like, this is American manufacturing at its finest.
By 2011, Boeing's largest customer, American Airlines, was turning to its only rival, Airbus. Boeing faced an urgent challenge: update its aging 737 family or lose its most loyal customers. That challenge was enormous. Totally re-engineer the 737 and yet convince the regulator that no new pilot training was required.
They had to somehow say this is exactly like the airplane that they were flying yesterday. They gave them 2 hours of differences training on a laptop. That's a joke.
So the chief pilot of the Lion airplane and the chief pilot of the Ethiopian plane would have had, what, 2 hours training on a laptop?
Yep. That was it. But it is fuel efficient. And that's all the airlines look at, fuel efficiency. That's a buzzword. The first time the test pilots applied power on takeoff, the airplane wants to roll. And they said, this is not the same airplane. We're going to have to do something with it. So they went back to the drawing board and somebody said, well, we could put this MCAS thing that we used to use in fighter jets. Fighter jet, you can bail out of it. You can't bail out of a 737 or a 747.
But why didn't Boeing say something about the MCAS system being in the plane? Why did they not advertise it?
Money. So they decided to gamble.
But despite reservations within Boeing's engineering team, commercially the 737 MAX was flying high. Orders for its new fuel-efficient wonder plane were coming in fast. So fast, the assembly line would begin to buckle under the pressure, with Boeing's global suppliers struggling to keep up with demand.
And then it all really started to dramatically change in the end of 2017. We started seeing, initially we were told our engines were going to come in late. And all of a sudden now lots of parts started coming in late. And you start doing what's called out-of-sequence work, which is, work that's being performed not in accordance with that tightly choreographed build plan, but just kind of chaotic. And that's when it really crystallized in my mind that these are really unnecessary risks. We need to shut down, we need to stop, this is madness.
Did you communicate it that blatantly?
I told him, I said, look, I've been in the military, and I said, we would shut operations down for far less, And that's when he said, well, the military is not a profit-making organization.
So this is it, Ed. This is the one we've all been talking about.
Yeah.
And these are brand new.
Brand new. I'm not really sure what that plastic bag is, but that tells me there's something missing. So these planes are supposed to be complete by the time they get here.
This 737 MAX is still awaiting a paint job. But with Virgin expecting the delivery of a new MAX every month, there's every chance it's destined for Australian skies.
How many of these things are coming out of this factory every week?
The company's only able to produce 32 right now a month because there are supply chain issues that they're having.
32 a month?
32, which is still an awful lot of planes, you know. I met the general manager in June of 2018. I retired in August. And, you know, 2 months later, Lion Air Flight 610 on October 29, 2018 crashed.
When you heard of that plane going down, all those people losing their lives, what did you think then?
I remember vividly, I was sitting on my floor in my family room watching TV, and I was headed in the background. And I heard an airplane crash. And I looked up and it said it was Lion Air, and then it said it was a 737 MAX. And then I just like, oh my God.
The line from Boeing was firm. This was a tragic case of operator error. The pilots were to blame. But Ed Pierson knew the clock was ticking on a second crash, so he urgently wrote to Boeing's board of directors.
So you write a letter to the board saying, listen, you need to get onto this because I think there's some sort of manufacturing defect from your experience,
right,
that could have led to the Lion Air crash. And then 2 weeks later, the Ethiopian plane goes down.
Mm-hmm. March 10th.
This is Samia's blouse. This is Samia's skirt. These are her shoes. You know, to me, she should be here. She should be here right now. Yesterday was her birthday. You know, I feel that she's very much present and like denied her life like just shortly ago. Her friends are getting married, they're having kids. You know, she should be able to do that too.
Amen.
And we should be able to be grandparents. She was 24, and she would be 30 now.
On board Ethiopian's Flight 302, the 24-year-old, seated in 16J, could end up having the most lasting impact on aviation safety. Samia Stumo was the great niece of one of the US's most famous consumer advocates, Ralph Nader. She comes from a family of fighters.
Samia is the glue of our family. She was very vibrant. She wanted to do good in the world. That was the last thing she said to my mom. Teta, I just want to do good in the world. If we had a criminal prosecution against Boeing, it was successful, and then people were incarcerated for that, that would change corporate culture in the United States. Then people would no longer think, oh, we can act with impunity because we'll just have insurance pay for it and I'll still get my bonus in my pocket.
The Stumos, Nadia, Michael, and their son Adnan have dedicated their lives to ensuring Samia didn't die in vain.
Are you guys voters in Massachusetts? Yeah. Yeah, I'm running for Congress against Richard Neal. So nice to meet you. Yeah, great to meet you. And it's,
Nadia is hoping to unseat a congressman who has been partly funded by Boeing.
And I got an aviation safety bill passed in Congress. My daughter died on a plane. We got it passed unanimously. I probably wouldn't be running for Congress if my daughter hadn't died like this, because our congressman never helped us. I just think they are evil. I mean, they actually don't care about people's lives. They're paying for these lives from insurance. It's not affecting their company at all.
He's nose down.
Next.
Did she cry for me? Did someone hold her hands? So, Boeing, did you hear my daughter cry?
The red flags Boeing knew of but ignored. And why these whistleblowers fear these are the warning signs another crash is imminent.
And you're like, oh my God, that information has never come out.
afternoon. How are you? Going to Addis, please.
So this is a recreation of that fateful Ethiopian flight. You're going to show us exactly what happened.
It is.
To understand how a 4-month-old Boeing MAX jet so catastrophically failed, killing all 157 on board, Boeing flight captain Ross Amer is replicating the flight in this simulator.
Take it away, Captain.
All right.
Adjust the band to secure the mask and breathe normally.
From takeoff to the moment of impact, it was 6 minutes and 4 seconds of terror.
And checklist complete. Lights, time, and here we go. All set. Takeoff power is set, airspeed's alive.
Nothing was unusual?
Nothing unusual. 80 knots, everything normal. Now we're in a high-speed regime of takeoff.
In an almost brand new jet?
In a brand new jet.
4 months old?
Yep.
Experienced pilot?
D1. Rotate. Normal rotation. That's when everything goes crazy. Right after rotation, he says, gear up, please. Gears up. That's when the stick shaker violently goes off.
Straight away?
Straight away, right after takeoff. And he's wondering, why am I stalling? Now, most of us go through our entire career without ever experiencing a real stall warning in the real airplane. This poor guy, he did everything perfect.
So this is telling him he's going too slow?
He's telling him it's going too slow and he's about to lose the airplane. The airplane is going to stall.
So what does he do?
So by now he says, flaps up, please. And the first officer raises the flaps. As soon as the flaps are up, that's when the MCAS kicks in.
The purpose of the MCAS software is to take control of the plane when it receives information telling it the nose is too high and the plane is about to stall. The MCAS activates a trim on the tail of the plane that effectively pushes the nose down. The problem on ET302 was the MCAS was receiving faulty information that the plane was about to stall when it wasn't.
The angle of attack sensor, given the false information to the MCAS computer saying your nose is up 75 degrees, which is not true. His nose is only up 15 degrees, which is the normal thing. But that indication to the MCAS computer, which he had no idea there was such a thing, is giving the false information that he's too slow.
The pilots were in a hopeless predicament, locked into a battle with a malfunctioning flight control system.
And at the same time, EGWPS is saying, don't sink, and he is sinking. He's able to trim up a little bit, and he pulls it back on again, basically like a roller coaster now. The airplane is doing this.
So let me get this right. There's a sensor on the nose of the aircraft that's faulty, that's giving a faulty reading to a piece of software in the back that the pilot doesn't know about.
Yes.
And so he's fighting things that he doesn't have any clue about.
He has no clue why. He's doing everything right now. He's got airspeed. In fact, it's increasing now, but the MCAS is pushing the nose down. It's violently pushing the nose down.
So he sees the nose coming down.
And his speed is increasing, but yet that stick shaker is continuously going on, telling him he's about to stall. Now he's increased the limit of the airspeed. He's past that, past the red line.
So he's going too fast.
Now he's going too fast. The clocker is telling him you're too fast. But also, stick shaker is telling him, no, you're too slow. He's totally confused. At this moment, he turns the cutoff switches, and for a minute, he has control over the trim.
So killed it, even though he didn't know it was there.
Even though they didn't, they
Which is a good thing, right?
Which is a good thing.
Unable to pull the plane out of a nosedive using the electric trim, the pilots switch off the electricity, which inadvertently switches off the MCAS. They now have one last hope to save the plane from a nosedive: the manual trim on the tail.
The trim is cut off now. The automatic trim, the electric trim is cut off. So that's when he says, give me some manual trim. Co-pilot extends the handle and tries to move this wheel opposite way. Give me some nose up, please.
This way.
Give me some nose up. In that scenario, with that speed, there was no way they could move that.
So this won't move now?
It won't move, and the airplane is finally in a nosedive. Right now, that MCAS that he doesn't know exists is giving false information to the computer that controls the MCAS and brings that violent maneuver or movement of the trim to a nose down, very high nose down.
They tried to turn this on and off a couple of times, didn't they?
Correct. And he was able to gain some control momentarily, but every time they engaged it, trying to gain some control over it, the MCAS violently pushed the nose down, like so. Finally, last minute, the speed is supersonic, but still the stick shaker is going, and the clacker is telling him you're too fast. The computer is telling him pull up, because he's going close. It's total confusion in that cockpit.
So we're going straight down?
We're straight down towards the ground, and he can't do anything about it. They're pulling as fast, as hard as they can, and there's no way they can pull the airplane out of this massive nosedive.
They can't fight it at all?
They can't fight it at all, and they just watch the airplane go right into the ground, as we see. That's it.
That's it.
Just as they did with the Lion Air crash 5 months before, Boeing again pointed the finger at the pilots. This was operator error. That one very quickly wore thin. So, in search of an identifiable culprit, Boeing blamed their newly installed MCAS software.
Maybe they were trying to hide something bigger, like wiring. You know, MCAS, you could go to India to some $10 an hour programmer and change the program. Changing the wiring of an entire 737 would cost millions.
So all eyes have been on MCAS, but in fact, if it is a wiring problem, then that would make it a manufacturing issue, Ross.
It is a manufacturing issue because what triggered the MCAS to go haywire was that angle of attack sensor.
But it wasn't only shoddy manufacturing that failed the Ethiopian Airlines and Lion Air pilots. Remember, as the angle of attack sensor and MCAS both worked to put ET-302 into a nosedive, the pilots turned to their last hope for survival: the manual trim. Boeing promised the Federal Aviation Administration their manual trim would work in almost any scenario. And so the FAA engineer who approved that manual trim felt totally deceived when he heard how completely it had failed.
The last 15 years that I was at the FAA, my job was regulatory and guidance material for handling qualities. In that, I would be, MCAS would fall into my area of responsibility, as well as manual trim.
Can I sum it up by saying steering the plane?
Steering the plane, yes.
Pretty important.
Pretty important.
When you found out that it hadn't worked, did that surprise you?
It did. It surprised me because Boeing had kind of made the case, or I guess led us to believe that the manual trim would always work, that there was always enough mechanical advantage there that...
What, that it was almost 100% effective?
That it was almost 100% effective, and it turns out not even close.
Next, indisputable evidence. We reveal the secret messages Boeing doesn't want the flying public to see.
It's stunning. I mean, it's unbelievable. That information has never come out.
How Boeing has managed to keep it secret until now.
Oh my God.
There are more headwinds for Boeing tonight after United Airlines found loose bolts among...
The company taking a battering over a string of shocking mishaps.
US regulators revealing there had been some warning signs.
Today, as we speak, do you think Boeing's manufacturing process is compromised?
Yes. I know it's compromised. It's an example, the Alaska Airlines.
We needed a search. We declared an emergency, and we have 177 passengers on board.
This happened only 9 months ago. On January 5, the emergency door of a 737 MAX operated by Alaskan Airlines blew off after it had climbed to nearly 5,000 meters.
Not only did those bolts never get installed, they inspected other Alaska Airline planes and they found similar hardware problems, missing things not done right. And this is the thing about an assembly line. You know, if you make a mistake, odds are you're going to be making it on other things, right?
You wrote to the CEO of Alaska prior to that door blowing out, warning of a possible incident. Why did you do that?
It was very obvious that Alaska had just a boatload of malfunction reports, aircraft system reports. It was the same sense I had before the two crashes. Like, the CEO needs to know that this is happening.
We could have ended up with something so much more tragic, and we're really fortunate that that did not occur here.
From 2021, when they first started getting MAX planes, to 2023, they had 53 MAX airplanes. They had submitted over 1,200 service difficulty reports. That's a technical problem. That's a flight control issue. That's something that's flight safety related.
But one airline with new planes putting in that number of reports, shouldn't that ring alarm bells and
Yes.
raise red flags all over the country?
Yes, sir. Alaska's legal department called me up. They wanted to talk to me about it. And the next thing you know, there are 95 reports every month, all the way through 2023. And then in December, it dropped to 10. Then it dropped to 1 in January. And that was the Alaska blowout incident.
In the past, my experience was that passengers didn't even know what type of airplane they were getting on. Nowadays, people actually call the airline and ask, am I on a MAX? I don't want to be on it. We had never heard that before.
Major safety failures at Boeing.
You can't blame them, can you?
No, I don't blame them. No.
It turns out 4 bolts were removed from the emergency door during production. And most alarmingly of all, Boeing has no idea why, because the required documents detailing the removal were never created.
The norm is get your jobs done. Hurry up, get your work done. Get the quality control done. You know, get it all done. And so that's why it wasn't a surprise at all. Today it could be the door blowout. Tomorrow it could be an issue with the flaps or the landing gear.
They call this place the Boneyard. Here in the Arizona desert, it's where the commercial airlines send their old planes to die, but traditionally after decades of service, and then they're used for scrap parts. But that's the incredible thing about the 737 MAX. That plane is less than 9 years old, and already it's been grounded around the country and other parts of the world no less than 3 times after various crashes and accidents. And now there's a growing chorus for fleets right around the planet to be grounded in a staged way so that 10% of every airline's MAX fleets are put over the pits and gone over with a fine-tooth comb so another crash cannot happen.
After the Ethiopian crash that killed 157 people, the FAA refused to ground the MAX. It took an alliance of global regulators from Canada, Europe, and here in Australia to force the FAA's hand.
I was ignored. I was told not to create delays. I was told, frankly, to shut up.
There was a 16-month investigation, and nothing says more about the MAX's problems than the return to service bulletin that was quietly handed to the airlines.
You know, they came out and publicly said, look, we're fixed the software, we've provided pilot training, and we found some wiring that needed to be fixed. You know, when I hear that, I think I'm with a couple wires. You know, okay, you got to reroute something, no big deal. But I kind of knew better because I'm like, wait a minute, that's what the public might be thinking, but it might be more complicated than.
So this service bulletin...
This is a service bulletin that went out.
It goes out from Boeing.
Going out from Boeing to the airlines.
To all their clients.
Yes. It's 343 pages of drawings, of notes, of things that they found. And this isn't even all of the electrical issues that we know about.
It meant the grounded planes were fixed, but did nothing about the manufacturing that created the problem.
Let's be clear about this. You're talking about planes coming off the production line, new planes, new MAXes, now, that are going out into the ether and to various clients, including airlines like Virgin Australia.
Yes, Virgin, like the other airlines, they're trying to, they want to trust Boeing, right? Because they've been able to trust them in the past. But they got their head in their sand if they think that these planes aren't coming with problems.
In the case of Ethiopian Airlines, Flight 302, Boeing knew of and even alerted the airline to electrical issues in its brand new MAX. For the first time, Ed can reveal this correspondence. Boeing did not provide it to crash investigators because it proves they knew about the MAX's problems.
It hadn't crashed at this point. So the Ethiopians send back the data, and Boeing comes back and says, we've analyzed the data, and we suspect it to be an intermittent electrical fault in the wiring. And you're like, oh my God.
On December 7, 2018, 3 months before the crash, Ethiopian Airlines reports a concerning trend in its new MAX 8, an uncommanded roll event. Days later, Boeing's own experts diagnosed the problem, saying they suspect the cause was an intermittent fault with the wiring. That wiring was responsible for sending important data to the computer that had the MCAS software. Boeing said this indicates that that computer with the MCAS was receiving invalid data.
As soon as I read that, that information has never come out, never been in any reports, and that's the Boeing company telling Ethiopian Airlines. And then a couple months later, that plane crashes, and they deny that the plane had any manufacturing issues, ever. Had any problem, you know? It's stunning. I mean, it's unbelievable.
Why haven't you resigned?
Senator, I'm sticking this through. I'm proud of having taken the job. I'm proud of our safety record, and I am very proud of our Boeing people.
You're proud of this safety record?
I am proud of every action we have taken.
Every action you've taken?
Yes, sir.
Wow. Wow. there's some news for you. Well, behind you can't see it. Behind you, the folks are showing pictures of the people who are the victims of your safety record. I think we can all see them. And I think the American public, when they fear to get on their airplanes, they understand your safety record. And frankly, sir, I think it's a travesty that you're still in your job.
After the break, Donald Trump's hand-picked prosecutor, who was supposed to punish Boeing.
History is rewriting itself. You're failing to learn from it, and when it repeats itself, it's gonna be on your heads.
Families of the crash victims accuse her of a staggering betrayal.
I mean, this case is about killing people, killing our daughter, killing 346 people.
And the Justice Department makes its final decision. Will they or won't they put Boeing on trial?
When the next crash happens, I hope everybody remembers where they are today.
I just think they are evil. They actually don't care about people's lives. They're paying for these lives from insurance. It's not affecting their company at all.
The story of how Boeing has escaped a criminal trial for killing 346 people starts in 2020.
The company was charged by the US Justice Department with misleading aviation regulators about safety issues with its 737 MAX planes.
Boeing's high-powered and well-connected Dallas legal team at Kirkland & Ellis brokered a special deal with the US Justice Department that threw Boeing a corporate lifeline.
It was here in Texas where Boeing got its best deal ever. Rather than being blamed for any of the problems, it copped what they call a deferred prosecution agreement. Put more simply, a suspended sentence, like being hit over the wrist with a limp lettuce leaf. Now, you might be wondering why we've come to cowboy country to get a penalty for Boeing when it's got factories in Seattle, Charleston, headquarters in Chicago, and now Virginia. That is a very good question.
Boeing announced that they were going to cooperate and seek a deal, and the case was going to be transferred from Washington, D.C. to the Northern District of Texas. But what was attractive about the Northern District of Texas was that a very conservative judge was located there who cooperated with Republican prosecutors. And they also had a U.S. attorney who was a fairly close associate of the Attorney General.
Columbia Law School professor John Coffey claims he has never seen a conspiracy to cover up a major corporate crime like this. That U.S. attorney was appointed to her post by President Trump himself. It's alleged Erin Neely Cox knew exactly what was needed of her when Boeing and the Justice Department came knocking.
Is this a normal process, Professor?
Not at all. This is a major exception. President Trump, it is alleged, believed that if we got Boeing dealt with and the problem rectified, the stock market would go back up just in time for the election that would benefit him. Normally, the president or the attorney general does not get involved in cases, particularly when they're being handled by the head of the fraud section.
To avoid a criminal conviction, Boeing paid a fine of $244 million as part of a $2.5 billion settlement. But more than half of that money was compensation for Boeing's airline customers. It also agreed to a 3-year good behavior bond. And if that wasn't proof enough of a cozy relationship between Boeing and its prosecutors, just 6 months later, Erin Neely Cox left the Justice Department to join Boeing's legal advisors.
She goes from prosecutor to working with Boeing's law firm. So she goes from gamekeeper to poacher.
And you ought to understand that that law firm probably pays the highest salaries in the country. So she didn't go there cheaply.
This is the very substantial house here in Dallas that Erin Neely Cox calls home. Not bad for a former prosecutor. And she's got another one too. There's a very impressive pad about an hour and a half in that direction, down on the shore of a lake in a gated enclave that looks pretty swanky. Still, I suppose when you're the partner in a law firm that acts for Boeing, they're the trappings of success. Success that, funnily enough, she wasn't keen to talk to us about. But when it comes to that sweetheart deal the Department of Justice did with Boeing, there are plenty of others who are happy to talk.
No senior officer of Boeing was ever indicted or seriously investigated. That's the first way in which this looks like a fairly rigged procedure. Now they find out that after this, an Alaska airline jet made by Boeing takes off with bolts missing from the door, and the door blows off in mid-flight, scaring the heck, of course, out of all the passengers. Now, that suggests that there is a more systematic, pervasive breakdown in the internal controls at Boeing.
The timing could not have been worse for Boeing. Just 2 days before the end of their good behaviour bond. For the families, the Alaska door blowout is a breach of that good behaviour bond. And that means Boeing can once again be criminally prosecuted for killing their loved ones. And months on, Justice Department officials have arranged a video call with the families of the crash victims to share their final decision. Will Boeing finally be put on trial?
Thanks everyone for joining on short notice.
It soon becomes abundantly clear that prosecutors have other plans.
I want you to tell me why in this case you are not going to prosecute, you are offering a plea deal. Why in this case, not talking about all your habits and all of the things that you usually do.
The Justice Department inexplicably offer Boeing a new deal, but one that looks exactly the same as the old one. To again avoid a trial, all Boeing will need to do is plead guilty, pay another $244 million fine, and invest $455 million into its safety compliance programs.
History is rewriting itself. You're failing to learn from it, and when it repeats itself, it's gonna be on your heads. We as the families have done the work for you.
When the next crash happens, I hope everybody remembers where they are today. Because the next crash, I guarantee you, will happen.
Wow. Two hours for that. So what do you think?
All the meetings start out with hope, and then the hope gets dashed as you kind of go through the meeting and understand what the details are.
Were you expecting bigger things?
We were expecting a lot bigger things. We were expecting a bigger fine. $243 million fine for a company like this is nothing. I mean, this case is about killing people, killing our daughter, killing 346 people. And after all this, it's still presented to the court as some paper fraud against the Federal Aviation Administration, full stop, with no further consequences.
Do you seriously think there'll be another crash? Or there could be?
There is no accountability, and everything is proceeding with all the same problems that caused the first two crashes.
Next, what our Australian aviation regulator has to say about more MAX jets coming to our skies. The reality for many Australian flyers is that soon avoiding a MAX will be almost impossible. As it currently stands, Virgin Australia is expecting a new MAX to join its fleet every month.
You saying you won't get on a MAX plane makes me worried from an Australian perspective. We've got an airline in Virgin, which is one of the major two. What would you be saying to them?
You need to, first of all, request a different airplane. The feedback needs to come from the traveling public that we don't want to fly on this airplane because we see the problems. We see the two crashes. We've seen the door come off the airplane. We've seen these things, and we know there's more out there.
So we asked our Civil Aviation Safety Authority 10 weeks ago if we could interview its CEO, Pip Spence, for this story. In fact, we wrote to them no less than 7 times. Now, CASA, as it's known, replied that while it was satisfied with Boeing's safety standards, they refused to provide their CEO or any other member of its staff to be available to say that on camera. Now, remember, this is a taxpayer-funded body whose primary duty is to keep Aussie travellers safe. So we didn't rush them. We gave CEO Spence plenty of time to reconsider. But CASA again wrote back and this time passed the problem to the American FAA, the same FAA that it trusts to give us safe planes, and the same FAA that originally cleared the Boeing MAX to carry passengers, a decision with tragic consequences. So we say to CASA, if you are sure these planes are safe, if you're confident your trust in the US regulator, the FAA, is not misplaced, at least have the courage to appear in front of the Australian flying public and explain why.
Your problem is there's a huge dependency that our regulator, the FAA, are doing their jobs. They don't investigate. They're not investigating these incidents. These are precursors. They need to investigate. We've seen issue after issue recur, a failure, like flight management computers.
Stay down and just do your brace position. And your safety information card. Just put your head all the way down, wrap your arms around your legs.
They've recently have had rolling incidents where they've traced it, the FAA has traced it to a wire bundle that was installed incorrectly and it's chafing. And they keep failing, and there's nobody fixing it. It's just a ticking time bomb.
Well, in a statement, Boeing told us they are confident in the safety and durability of Boeing airplanes. As for Virgin Australia, it tells us they are one of over 80 airlines operating the 737 MAX daily, and that safety is Virgin's top priority. The Federal Aviation Administration insists it only put the 737 MAX back into service following a, quote, comprehensive and methodical safety review process. They also said that none of their many investigations of the MAX crashes produced evidence that a production flaw played a role. All of those statements are available for you in full on our website. But before we go, here's a look at next week's episode of Spotlight.
You're not interviewing someone who's saying to you, I've got it worked out and I've got all the answers. I'm not that person. I'm not that person.
James Packer, like never before.
Money is not a guarantee of happiness.
On 7 News Spotlight, the billionaire opens up on his darkest times.
I would prefer to be rich and unhappy than to try and be poor and unhappy.
And his special bond with friend Robbie Williams.
The same sort of illness that we share. It's a disease of isolation.
I'm Liam Bartlett. Thanks for your company. Good night.